Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are following the security engineer path. So we did the security engineer intro. I'm not going to cover some of these because they're just super basic to read. We're going to cut right into the threats and risks, and we're going to go to governance and regulation. Now, this one is kind of a pain in the butt if you don't find this interesting, but this is something if you ever want to go far in security, you need to understand and you need to know, especially if you ever plan on going into leadership in security. The other thing to keep in mind, some people find this very fascinating, the managerial and the GRC and stuff like that. They find it very interesting. And I've seen a lot of people really get involved in this. So if you're in security or you're getting into security and you're like, I don't know what I really like, try it out. You might really like GRC. I found a lot of people that really like it or they really hate it. I haven't really found anyone that's like, whatever, it's okay. I find that most people love it or they're like, oh my God, they dread it, right? Because this is where the audits come in and this is where the compliance and the standards and the blah, blah, blah come in, right? So this is where the boring stuff comes in for some people, but some people find it very fascinating. I will tell you, I'm actually one of the few that is right in the middle. So let's dive into it. Before I do, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that sub button, guys. It helps out so much. And we are right on pace to almost hit 6K this year, which is insane. My goal is 5K, so I'm so excited. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you check out the Discord also. We're doing giveaways. We do streams every week in the Discord. We also are doing a CTF at the end of the year. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. So let's dive into it. Now, cybersecurity is rapidly evolving, blah, blah, blah. So to combat this, there is a comprehensive approach to information security, governance, and regulation. So long story short, what they're saying here is that there is requirements for a company to process data, okay? So what that means is the government, whether it's the standards that you're working in, meaning if you're a financial institution, you're doing credit card data, you're doing medical data, whatever the data is you're processing, you have a basic necessity to follow these requirements because you are dealing with people's data. The reason this is even the thing is because they don't want businesses out there and companies out there just saying, hey, I'm going to stand up a hospital tomorrow and I'm not going to protect any of your data, but come on in, right? Because it's just a disaster waiting to happen. So it forces companies who otherwise wouldn't spend the money on security to do what they need to do to protect data, okay? So it's a good thing, but it is a nightmare for security professionals because of the audits and the compliancy requirements and all that stuff. So it says to understand this, you should have these two down. I would recommend going and doing them because those two boxes, because otherwise you may not understand what's going on in some of them, but that's okay. Let's dive into it. So important terminologies. There's governance, regulation, and compliance, GRC, as I kept stating, right? So governance is, and I'm reading the definitions for a reason, they're managing and directing an organization or system to achieve its objectives and ensure compliance with laws, regulations, and standards, okay? There's a reason I'm reading that specifically. Number one, this is the only one that reads this way, right? It's saying they're ensuring compliance with laws, regulations, and standards. Well, the next one is regulation, right? So why do we have a governance? Well, this is ensuring that you're following this, right? That's what it is. So now regulation, a rule or law enforced by a governing body to ensure compliance and protect against harm. So the regulation is ensuring you are following that governance. You are following what we're telling you, right? Then compliance, the state of adhering to the laws, regulations, and standards that apply to an organization or system. So keep in mind, they all go together. They all go hand in hand. That's why they're often called GRC as a whole and not specifically. Okay. So information security governance, so this is representing an organization's established structured policy. So you can see here they have it as a tree. I think that's what that's supposed to be. But they have strategy, policies, procedures, risk management, performance measurements, and compliance, okay? So the strategy, developing and implementing a comprehensive information security strategy that aligns with the organization. So what is this? This is saying, hey, here's our business. Our business does this type of business, right? We sell this product. We do this service. We do whatever the business does, right? We need a strategy that keeps our information secure, but makes sense for the business, right? It doesn't make sense if you're a fully remote staff to say, okay, let's implement a VPN that requires you to be on site to connect to, right? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't help anybody. You're just going to lock other people, the remote people, out. So with that, build a strategy that makes sense for your business and keeps security and information and data secure as a whole, that follows what you're supposed to, which is the compliance part. So policies and procedures. Preparing policies and procedures that govern the use and protection. So what is this? This is saying, okay, we have our strategy. We know what our goal is. We know what we're trying to do, and we know how we're going to get there. Okay. The policies and procedures say, okay, what are we going to put in place that says you have to, or we have to do this to get there, right? So the policies, it's a big one. So you may have a policy at your company that says, hey, I can't connect my personal device to the work network, right? That's a policy in place stopping you from doing it, keeping them secure, that is aligning with their strategy, right? So now you've got your strategy, and then you're building policies that match that strategy. And then procedures are, how are we going to get there, right? Well, we can't just say, hey, we don't allow you to connect to our network with a personal device because, okay, well, what's stopping me from plugging it in, right? That's where the procedures come in. What procedures are we going to put in place that then stop that, right? Are we going to actually have some sort of consequence? Are we going to actually put a block that stops devices that we don't want on the network? What are we going to do? What's procedures we're going to implement? Now, risk management. This is exactly what it sounds like. Conduct risk assessments to find what threats are out there, right? And keep in mind, GRC is an ongoing thing. It's not something that you're going to go, boom, we built it out, we're good, we're completely ready to go. This is a ongoing thing. So, okay, so now we have our risk management. Now we're looking at what risks are involved here. Now, performance measurements. How are we doing? Key performance indicators, KPIs, okay? How are we doing? We're saying, hey, we're protecting our network, right? We're keeping everything secure, everything's good. How? How can we prove that? If someone comes in right now and audits us, how do we prove that, right? Well, we need key performance indicators. We need something that states that, right? Okay, if we're saying our users are really good at phishing, they don't get busted on phishing emails, they'll never get click on phishing emails. How do we know that? How can you prove that? You're just saying that because you haven't got ransomware yet? No, there's key performance indicators. We do phishing tests and 96% of people pass the phishing test, right? That is a key indicator, right? Or we do vulnerability scans and 99.9% of our systems are not vulnerable, right? That is a key indicator. That is proving what you're saying you're doing. Now, compliance, this is complying with relevant regulations and industry best practices. So this is saying we not only secure our systems, right, but we do it to the standard of the industry. Now, most companies, I will say, should go above and beyond that standard, but that standard is the bare minimum you need to do to keep the data safe. Okay, so information security regulation, key benefits. Okay, so this is just benefits. The benefits are kind of self-explanatory in a way, right? So more robust security posture. So if you follow these, what they're telling you, you will have more robust security posture. You'll be more secure, right? That's the entire purpose of the regulation. So why do we need to specify that that's the benefit? Obviously, it's benefit. Increased stakeholder confidence. This one you do want to know because this is something I see a lot of people misunderstand. When I say misunderstand, people that are coming into the industry, right? Because this path is for people learning about GRC, right? So people that are coming into this space, right, need to understand that stakeholder confidence is everything for a business. When they say stakeholder confidence, they're not talking about, okay, someone that literally went and bought shares in your company. That's not what they're talking about. This is also for non-public companies. What they're talking about is people that are involved, people that are decision makers, people that actually have a stake in what you're doing, right? Those people need to believe in what you're doing. If they don't believe in what you're doing, you're going to get shut down every stop. When you go say, hey, I need $1 million to buy this tool and do this task and do this, they're like, no, I don't believe in what you're doing. I don't think you're right. I don't think you know what you're talking about. Now, if you have full buy-in because you've proven time and time again and you have that confidence built up from the stakeholders, you get a lot further, okay? Regulatory compliance. This is, like I said before, if you're a medical person, you have to do HIPAA, right? If you do credit card data, you have to do PCI. If you are in Europe, you have to do GDPR. These are compliance standards that you have to do based on the industry you're in, okay? Now, better alignment with business objectives. This is just self-explanatory again. If you're more secure, you can align better with what the business is wanting to do. If you're always worried that you are going to get attacked, it's hard to align with those business objectives. Because what if the business is like, we want to grow times 10 in the next 5 years? Well, we can't do that if we're not even secure with how big we are now. We have to align with those business objectives, okay? Informed decision making. This is big. This is really big because I'll tell you, if I go and say as a company, hey, I want to buy this tool, right? There's this software out there, Zoom, for instance. Let's just use Zoom. And Zoom is not insecure. I'm not saying this. I'm using it as an example. So let's say most companies use Zoom, right? So let's say we use Zoom. Zoom or Teams is usually the go-to for companies. Let's say you use Zoom, right? Okay, well, let's say the company's like, hey, I want to use Zoom. We currently use Teams. We want to go to Zoom. Okay. They need to know those when making those big decisions. What if Zoom's insecure? What if they didn't know that based on the security practices of Zoom, and they go and they make that decision, and then next thing you know, their company's attacked because Zoom was insecure, right? You see this a lot with when people buy a product or when vulnerabilities come out. Companies across the world go, oh crap, we use that product, right? They need to be informed of that stuff before making those purchases. That's why you take such a hit when you get attacked if you're a company, because now you're no longer trustworthy, which then when people are making informed decisions, they say, let's not go with this one, let's go with this one, because these people have been attacked. So keep that in mind. Competitive advantage. This is the same thing I just talked about. If you have a good track record, if you are SOC 2 compliant, if you have things in place to prove you're protecting your customers' data and your business partners' data, you have a competitive edge, because there's companies out there that don't have that do struggle with that. So now, relevant laws and regulations, exactly what I just said. GDPR for European, HIPAA for healthcare, PCI for financial, or basically if you use credit card data, and Gramm-Leach-Bliley. That is basically anybody that's a non-public personal information, including, so it's, you can see, sensitive to their customers' non-public personal information. This is if you're a financial institution and you have customers' data. When they say non-public, it's a gray area, because what's public, right? I wouldn't want to ever give out my customer's address, but that's technically public data. You know what I mean? So that's where you got to really read into the rules and regulations to know the details. This is where some people find it very interesting, and some people are like, I'm not reading an entire doctrine of all these regulations. But keep that in mind, that there is certain standards you must adhere to if you're a company. All right, so the term used for legal and regulatory frameworks that govern use and protection of assets is a regulation. HIPAA targets which domain? Healthcare. Now, here's where you can get just a boatload of information and help. Information security frameworks, okay? These frameworks are built out in a way that actually walks you through some of this GRC stuff, right? Because let's say you're a small company, you're coming up, you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you hire some security people, and you're probably not paying them what the industry standard is, so they're not experienced yet. So they're trying to figure out, how do I follow these GRC requirements? And now that we're doing credit card data, we're getting PCI audited, and what's going on, right? Like all this stuff is happening. Well, you can look at these frameworks and they give you things like this: policies, standards, guidelines, procedures, baselines, okay? They give you all this stuff, and they give you examples, they give you standards, they give you frameworks as it declares, and tells you, here's best practices, right? And you can go through, and it takes a long time, but you can go through and you can match your business to that framework and say, I follow NIST standards, here's NIST, right? And NIST is just a big one of the frameworks. But so you can see, developing governance documents. That's the first thing you should probably do. If you don't have any, right? If you don't have anything, you need to have documents. Documents are your best friend. I'll tell you this from experience. If you get audited, documents save you. What do I mean? Okay, I can't tell you how many times I've been audited. and they're like, hey, you said you do this. I need proof. Okay, you say that your password requirements are 15 characters long. Prove it. Okay, well, how do I prove it, right? Well, with documents. That's the easiest way. That's the reason I said it. That's the easiest way. I've been in companies that didn't have those documents in place, and guess what? How do I prove it? I now have to spend hours on a call walking through the steps to prove, okay, you say 15 characters, so now I'm logging into Active Directory, looking at the password policy, showing them on the screen, okay, that's 1A of 206C, right? So I have to go through all these and show them. If I have the documents, I don't have to do that, right? If I say, here's the steps I put in place here's the actual procedures I have in place to change the password policy, and here's our standard and our policies for passwords, here it is. Here's how you have it. It's documented, it's proven. I don't have to go through it with you. Okay, perfect. They review that on their own time, and now you just saved yourself hours and hours of work. Okay, so with that, you identify the scope and purpose. What is the purpose of the document? What's the scope? What am I doing? Is it for my business? Is it for your business? Is it for our combined businesses? Do we have a business agreement? What's the scope? What are we doing? Research and review, pretty easy. Let's say I work in Canada, right? Which I don't live in Canada. I live in the US. Everyone knows that. But let's say I work in Canada. Let's say I live in a certain province in Canada, okay? There's a law and regulations around that area. I have to know them, right? If I'm going to do business in this area, I have to know the laws and regulations and make sure I'm up to snuff. Otherwise, I'm just opening myself up for huge, huge issues. So you do your research and your review. Okay, you review existing policies, procedures, and other documents to avoid duplicating efforts. Exactly. You go through, you say, okay, do we already have this policy? Like when COVID happened, everybody had to write a work from home policy all of a sudden. Nobody had one. Okay, well, now let's say it's years later. Do you need to rewrite that policy? If you do, go back and look at the old one. Are you just rewriting the same thing, or are you adding stuff to it? Are you making it updated? Are you making it better? Make sure you're actually doing that. And then draft the document, right? Go ahead and draft it the way you want. You should have a template if you have a business, and that template, every document you have should be in the same format. Why? It just makes it so much simpler for everybody involved. Review and approve. You should definitely have stakeholders review it. Why? Because number one, legal. What if you write it and legal's like, oh, there's a loophole here. We could get around this if we need to. You need to cinch it up legally. Compliance teams, they're the ones that have to prove that you're compliant, right? They need to see the documents. Senior management has to sign off on it. So you want all these stakeholders to actually sign off and agree that this is the right process and the right document. Implementation and communication, pretty simple. We now have the new procedure in place. We have new policy in place. We're going to push it out. Everybody's going to follow it now, and I'm going to communicate to everybody this is the new standard. Now, how you do that, that's based on your business practices and your strategies. Now, review and update. You should always be reviewing and updating your document, because if your document's from 2010, it's probably not the same process that you do now, and therefore you're not doing what your documents say, and now you're basically lying in a sense. So here is a real world example. I used the password policy earlier. Preparing a password policy. Define password requirements, define password usage guidelines, storage, change at rest, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff, you can read it. But you can see this is a policy. They need to go through and write it and make sure that it matches what they want, what their business strategy is, right? Making an incident response procedure. Again, you want to go through and you want to actually follow the frameworks and the standards. And then you want to go ahead and say, okay, we've got this. Great. Now, how do we communicate that? How do we review it? How do we go through? We want the right people involved in these steps as well. So this is a very long process, but I will tell you it will change. I actually hated GRC when I was coming up in cybersecurity because it was so boring to learn, like, okay, if I have HIPAA data, I got to do this. Or if I have PCI data, I got to do this, right? That's boring to me, right? But as you see the big picture and as you follow these frameworks, you realize it actually is making us way more secure. So if we document things, it's so much easier for me. It's so much easier if I hire someone new. They can look at the document. They know exactly what's going on. I don't have to try and walk them through everything. It's so much nicer. And you start realizing, okay, there's some method to this madness. So The steps that involve periodic evaluation of policies and making changes is called review and update. You want to always review and update. Set of specific steps for undertaking a particular task is a procedure. Okay, now governance, risk, and compliance. So GRC, we're back at her, right? So the frameworks we're going to cover more, but the governance, risk, and compliance, we have the governance component. Okay, this is involves guiding an organization by setting its direction through information security strategy, which includes policy, standards, baselines, frameworks, etc., along with the established appropriate mod. So first things first, not everybody follows frameworks. So just keep that in mind. If that's not for you, if you every step of the way with the framework, you have to go a way off, then maybe a framework's not for you. Maybe you have to do something yourself. So just keep that in mind. Risk management component involves identifying assets, assessing and prioritizing risk. So the governance is guiding an organization, getting them in the right direction, getting them pushed to, okay, here's what we should be doing as an organization. The risk management component, we need to identify our assets, identify what's going on, identify our network, identify our security posture, prioritize, okay, what's our critical servers, what's our critical stuff, what is the data that's important to us, what will cause us the most harm. Now let's start focusing on securing that, right? Then compliance, this is meeting those legal, regulatory, and industry obligations, right? So if you legally have to do XYZ, this is where the compliance piece comes in, and this is where they'll actually make sure that you are doing it legally so you don't get in trouble. Now, here's how to develop these programs and generic guidelines. Again, define the scope, conduct a risk assessment, figure out what's going on with your system. You know, what is the risk here? Develop policies and procedures, establish governance processes, okay? This is a big one. For example, the organization might establish a security steering meeting that meets regularly to review security risks, okay? So this is a big one. Establish something that allows you to continue improving this process. The process should never stop growing, regardless. Even if you think you have it perfect, still meet, because people come up with new ideas. People figure new things out, right? Something in the new industry might change. There's all kinds of things. Implement controls. This is the technical and non-technical controls. This is, okay, we need to collect logs for XYZ compliance. Now we implement a SIM, right? That's a technical control. So just things like that. Monitor and measure performance. So how are we doing? Our key performance indicators. Remember that. How are we doing? Can we prove it? Okay, we stopped 52 attacks this month. How do we know that? Well, we can go to our firewall and show the different attempts, right? Those are key performance indicators. Continuously improve. The GRC program is constantly reviewed and improved on. That's what I said earlier. All right. This is an example in the financial sector. Governance-related activities. Nominate the governance level executives and make financial-related policies such as bank secrecy, anti-money laundering policy, risk management. Okay, so this is in the financial, they're going to get governance level executives and make these policies, right? Because that's the governance related activities. Now, the risk management activities are identifying the risks, the possible outcomes, and the countermeasures, right? Now, this is through cyber attacks, stolen credentials, and phishing. So that's the risk assessment that they're going to do. And then compliance, to make sure we meet legal requirements, we're making sure that we use SSL and TLS to avoid man in the middle. Perfect. You got the compliance requirement. Now, what is the component in the GRC framework that involves identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risk to the organization? That's risk management. Is it important to monitor and measure the performance of developed policy? Yes, obviously. You want to keep it up to date. Now, privacy and data protection. Okay, so here's the GDPR and the PCI DSS is what they're just showing the two examples, but there's a lot more than that, so just keep that in mind. Depending on where you're working, you may fall under these. The GDPR, some places too, just keep in mind, some places will say, like, if you're in the United States, they may say, I'm GDPR compliant. It doesn't mean they necessarily do business in the EU. It means they are up to GDPR standard, so if they wanted to do business in the EU, they can. And some places will do this. Why? Because they want you to know, hey, I'm up to this standard and I can handle this, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind, you can go through and read this, the whole thing if you want. It's pretty long. But one thing to keep in mind, here's the big takeaway here. You have tier 1 and tier 2, okay? These are more severe violations, including unintended data collection, sharing data with third parties without consent, maximum penalty amounting to, look at this, 4% of the org's revenue, okay? That's 4% of the revenue. That is a shitload of revenue if you think about it. Even if a company only made $100,000, right? You're taking $4,000 of that. That doesn't sound like a lot, but if that's all the money you made and you're taking 4%. It's a lot of money, right? Now, tier 2, less severe violations. This is data breach notifications, cyber policies, et cetera, et cetera. This is 2% of the organization's revenue, which is still a lot. You know what I mean? If you are on a tight budget, especially like nowadays where the economy is a little bit bad, that's a big fine. So keep that in mind, because these fines do go out pretty regularly. So now, what's the maximum fine for tier 1? 4%. In terms of PCI DSS, what does CHD stand for? And I don't know if it actually says it in here. I didn't see it, but I just guessed. But you could actually go and read it if you wanted. But CHD stands for cardholder data. All right. Now, NIST special publications. So this one here, security, privacy controls, information, blah, blah, blah. NIST 853. I don't expect you to memorize that. You can look up NIST, and this will probably pop up almost every time. But this is the publication that you're really going to look at, and this is security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations, okay? This is, I mean, I can open it for you, but it's 300-400 pages, so I don't think you're going to be reading it right now. But if you are interested, open it up and read it, because it's very interesting. It tells you exactly what they recommend for everything. So it's actually extremely nice. Like, if they recommend that you have 15 character passwords, it'll say, we recommend, here's your password policy, 15 characters, minimum length, strength, blah, blah, all that stuff. I mean, they give you pretty much everything you ever need to know to secure your environment in NIST. So you can see among all the families, program management is one of the crucial ones. So you can read this if you want. I'm not super, I don't expect you guys to go through and read the NIST standard, but you should know some of the best practices. And you should, when you are building out a security infrastructure, you should be using a framework like this, because it is so detailed. There's so much stuff you're going to miss. If you just were like, I can just secure stuff, you're going to miss a lot. So you can see they have these controls. They're under administrative controls are these ones, technical controls are these ones, physical controls, and strategic controls. So you can see here we have, you have which category does the media protection lie? And you can see right here, media protection is under physical controls. So how does that make sense? Well, you're protecting the media. How? Physically. You're physically having a control. So that's what that would be under. Now, per NIST, in which control category does incident response lie? And administrative control, incident response, right? And this will walk you through all the different incident response plans you should have and everything else. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge. I recommend it highly, highly, highly to read it, but it is very long and it will take you a long time. Now, one thing I will say, you can actually get NIST certified if you want. I was NIST certified years ago. I don't know if it expires, so maybe I'm not anymore. I don't even know. But you can get NIST certified, and it means that you understand NIST as a whole and that you could take a system and make it NIST compliant given the time, right? So, I mean, it's a very good thing to have, but it's one of those certs that, like, it's not going to give you any technical expertise, or you don't need to be technical to do it. It's just letting you understand the framework and the way they say you should best secure your network. Keep in mind, NIST also is not a regulatory standard, meaning nobody's going to come to you and say, show us your NIST compliant, right? But what they might do is say, you said you're NIST compliant, show me, right? Like a cyber insurance company or something like that. That might be the case. They may say that. So keep that in mind. Now, which phase name of NIST 853 compliance? Best practices results in correlating identified assets and management. And that's right here. Data and permissions under map right there. So now here comes information security management and compliance. So ISO IEC 27001, internationally recognized. Why is this a big deal? I really don't care if you memorize all this. I recommend you read it. I recommend you go to the link. I recommend you learn this stuff. But me talking about it isn't going to help you. It's another framework, okay? Meaning it's another guideline on how to secure things. Here's what you should take away from this. SOC 2. Okay, SOC 2 is an auditing standard that evaluates the usefulness of a service organization's controls related to confidentiality, available integrity, and privacy. independent auditors conduct SOC 2 audits. Okay, what that means is I sell you a product. It's a software as a service. It's an infrastructure as a service. It's a piece of software. It's whatever. I sell you a product. I'm selling a product, anything. I say I am SOC 2 compliant. What does that mean? It means an independent auditor, not related to SOC 2, not related to ISO, IEC, nothing. Independent auditor comes in and says, you meet this standard. This is the best thing you can do if you're trying to get business. Okay, why? Because if I say I'm SOC 2 compliant, and when the auditor does this, they give you a SOC 2 audit, right? You have the report. Now, when I go to sell something, when I go to sell to get more people involved in my company, when I go to do anything, I show them that report. They can now look at they don't show what vulnerabilities you have. They don't say, this person's got it's not a pen test. They don't say, hey, this person's got a vulnerability on the SSH server, nothing like that. But what they do say is this person secures all your data at rest, right? This person secures all your data in transit, and they use secure algorithms, things like that. So your data is secure in what facets. So it is a phenomenal thing to do and will help you tremendously in business, but it is very hard and very difficult to do because it does take a long time and you have to pay for it. So keep that in mind. All right, now so preparing for undergoing a SOC 2 audit, they'll tell you very much similar to the other frameworks, right? This isn't the SOC 2 audit is not a framework, but preparing for it, you can see determine the scope, choose an auditor, plan the audit, prepare for the audit, conduct the audit, receive the report. So now, which ISO component involves selecting and implementing controls? Risk treatment, and you can see that right here. Risk treatment involves selecting and implementing controls, okay? Now, in SOC 2, generic controls, which control shows that the system remains available, and that is availability right there. Ensure that systems remain available. Now, conclusion, let's go ahead and view the site. They're going to have us do, I skipped the tour the first time. I recommend taking it because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I was like, what is going on here? But what it is, okay, so this first line of balloons is phishing emails. What control can prevent that? And that would be, as you can see, user awareness. So we hit that dart, boom, and it asks us a question. Which of the following is a valid NIST publication dealing with security and privacy controls? Remember, 853. Bingo. Now, the next one, unpatched software. So automatic patch management. Which of the following frameworks primary assists in information security and compliance? I read that like a child. SOC 2. Okay. Now, unregulated, non-compliant. Okay. So how do we get from unregulated, non-compliant? We get SOC 2 audited, which is a good framework for us. Now, I know earlier I probably confused you because I said it and I was distinguishing the two, but I said SOC 2 is not a framework. It's a framework. The audit itself is not a framework. It is an audit. So that's where I was if I confuse you on that. So now man-in-the-middle attack, how do we fix that? Secure connection, right? And then GDPR is data leakage. And you notice it says EU. So that's the key or the hint. If it's in EU, GDPR is the regulation. And then you get Tryhackme Secure 1001. So if this excites you, GRC may be your thing, right? If you're like, hey, this sounds really cool, I really want to like dive in and figure out what regulations, what frameworks, because it is really cool when you get into it. It's just a lot of information. But if you are a small company or even, a medium-sized company and you're like, man, I'd really like to secure my stuff more, but I don't have a whole big security staff, I don't have a huge budget, these frameworks are free. You can look at them and you can take them and actually test your systems against their frameworks and say, ooh, we need to kind of step it up a little bit. So hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully GRC makes sense to you guys because it is a very cool thing. If it bores you, just know that if you ever want to keep progressing in cybersecurity, you need to understand it. So thanks, guys. Hope you guys have a great day.